We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. It is Friday. It's been a long week. We're going into the weekend, and this should be a fun weekend. I'm headed to Savannah on Sunday. We'll be there till Thursday, kind of the typical stretch. You don't have to worry. There'll still be Rational Boomer podcasts. There'll be plenty of TikToks. Nothing really changes. Some good news. I've got some guests coming up that you'll be looking forward to. Ed will be on maybe Sunday, maybe Monday. I don't know which day. I'm still trying to figure this out. And then Old Soul will be back. So that will be interesting too. I know you've all been looking forward to that, and she will be back. I can't tell you what day it's going to be because I'm going out of town. So I'm trying to adjust things so that it's easiest and sounds the best. Because when I go down to Savannah, it's a little less quality. However, I'm going to fix that too. I'm picking up a new laptop and some other stuff. So when I am traveling, we won't get much difference in quality. So you know what's coming up. Just be prepared for it. And you'll be looking forward to Ed and Old Soul, and there may be a couple of others in there. So we'll keep you posted as to who's coming on and what's going on. Yesterday I had a opportunity to spend a short time with my granddaughter. Um, my wife's kind of a photographer, and my son uses Photoshop a lot. And my wife knows nothing about Photoshop. And actually, the pictures were great, but she's overcritical of herself, and she wanted my son to help her with these photos. Well, it's just cool. We get to go up and see my son. We get to go see my granddaughter. We go over to the farmer's market, spend about 15 minutes there. I'm trying to buy my granddaughter whatever she wants. Dad and grandma saying, no, don't do that. And I'm going, well, how about just this? So we're messing around. Anyway, we get back to his home, and my wife and my son are working on these photos. And my job is to go hang out with the granddaughter. And she's laying on her dad's bed, playing on a iPad, some games from PBS Kids. They're all learning type things. And she's playing. And I'm amazed by how adept she is for being 3 years old to know how to run this thing. She's got quite an aptitude for it. Anyway, I'm sitting, I just don't know how to deal with this. I'm sitting there and I'm watching her, and I'm saying, boy, you do a good job at this. You really know your stuff. And she looks at me and she goes, yeah. And so, it's getting a little warm. So I take off my hat and I set it down. And as she's not looking at me, and she says, Grandpa? I said, yeah. And she looks over at me. She goes, put on your hat. I go, what? She says, put on your hat, Grandpa. Why? Just put on your hat. So I put on my hat. And she goes, that's better. I said, what do you want to tell me? And then she proceeds to tell me whatever she wanted to tell me. I don't know if I should take offense to that. Grandpa, you need to cover up as much shit as you can get away with, because this is probably intolerable. But with that hat, it makes it more palatable. Now, she didn't say that because she's 3, but I'm thinking she's thinking that. I don't know if I should be insecure about that or not. But anyway, I had a chance to spend some time with her. That was fucking awesome. All right. We've got a bunch of emails. We've had just a spate of emails as of late, so we might as well get to them. First one starts out, hi, Mike. Thank you for repeating the info from Old Soul. Much appreciated. I was listening today and I had a few things I wanted to mention. You said something regarding Hunter Biden about how he was raised and his addiction. It got my hackles up a tad, even though I know you are an empathetic person. Not sure if I mentioned this before, but 2 of my 3 daughters are addicted to heroin. I luckily did not lose either of them, but I also know how lucky I am that they are both clean now, 6+ years, and productive. My issue is I had nothing to do with them getting addicted. The one started on drugs because they were given to her by her doctor. She hasn't it's a malformation, and it's a long word, and I don't know what it is. It's basically an abnormal, snarled tangles of blood vessels that cause multiple irregular connections between your arteries and veins. I'm sorry to hear that. Now, these malformations most often occur in the spinal cord and in any part of your brain or on its surface, but can develop elsewhere in the body. My daughter's brain is in her brain. My daughter's brain is in her brain and cause debilitating headaches. I think there's a typo there. The doctors here in Delaware had not seen this before, and their immediate treatment was Percocets. Several years later, the opioid crisis happened, and the doctor stopped handing out her perks like candy and cut back her prescription. This sent her for looking for opiates on the streets. I went through so much guilt, blame, etc. I know now there wasn't anything I could have done to stop her, but my parents still feel responsible. All I'm asking for is a bit of grace for Joe and all the parents that have lived through the hellscape that is addiction. You also covered religion. I agree with everything you said, but I wanted to add that many wars going back to the Crusades were started by religion. Absolutely. There needs to be, as you said, a separation of church and state as it was planned in the Constitution. I don't see the Republicans letting this happen since they have no respect for the Constitution or our democracy. Speaking of the Constitution and the subject of Trump being disallowed on the ballot, I would like him to be taken off the ballot in every state, but I don't see this happening, at least not in the red states. I just think if he's allowed to be on the ballot, it is one more instance of the Republicans spitting in the face of our Constitution. I realize he most likely will not make it till the election, but a part of me thinks he may keep hanging on just to be spiteful and try to save his ass since he thinks he will win. Lastly, you talked about the weather in Minnesota. I just wanted to tell you, I know what you mean. Living in Michigan for my youth, I totally get it. While we sometimes get bad weather here in Delaware, it is nothing like Michigan. I could go the rest of my life without cold or snow, and I wouldn't miss it. Anyway, thanks for everything you do. I'm loving all the shows with the guest. It shakes things up a bit and just gives me more to love. Hugs, Deb. Thank you, Deb. I appreciate it. I just want to make a comment. You were suggesting that I was holding Joe Biden responsible for Hunter Biden's addiction. And I don't. You know, a lot of people have people in their families that are addicted, and there's not much they can do to stop it. I mean, when you're raising your kids, you try to treat them the right things, but you never know when something happens that sets something off. Now, you have to understand with Hunter, he's had a pretty tragic life, as has Joe Biden. His mom and sister were killed in a car accident when he was very little. His brother, his hero, died of cancer. And not everybody handles these things the same way. And obviously, he handled it badly. He's fortunate to live with a father who's successful and has money. So this gives him a lot of sway, a lot of opportunities somebody else might not have. Now, I will say this. I am sympathetic to anybody who's addicted to anything. I mean, I've told you before, I quit drinking like 32 years ago, and I wasn't an alcoholic at the time, and I didn't have to go through a process. I just stopped. But I could have easily been there if I hadn't stopped. And I've known other people in my lives who died of addiction. I know it's really strange. There were a couple of girls that I went to high school with that, were all American girls in the 70s, prom queens, athletes, that sort of thing, and ended up dying of drinking, which is crazy and sad. So I have empathy for people who are addicted to things. I think my point was this. If Hunter Biden committed crimes, he should be prosecuted, presumably convicted, and punished for it. Being a drug addict or being high or drunk isn't an excuse. These things would have happened at the hands of these people who are addicted. It is a sad situation, and it appears as though Hunter Biden has made his way to a sober life, and that's good news that he's on the right track now. But I wasn't really faulting anybody here. You know, things happen in life, things are tough, and people handle things differently. So I'm not really faulting anybody, but I am saying if you committed crimes, regardless of how you were affected, you are responsible. If I'm if somebody is driving a car and they are drunk and they kill somebody, being drunk is the reason they killed somebody and not an excuse to not be held accountable. And I think that's the case in any other crimes that somebody who's addicted or under the influence um, commits a crime, they're accountable for it, should be accountable for it. Thank you, Deb. Hugs back. Next one says, good morning, Boomer. KCT here. I've only emailed a few times, but I follow you and several others who share our views to get the crazies out of politics. Now, this is a long one. If you want to go get a beverage, you may want to do that now. But turn it up so you can hear it, because this is an interesting email. It's funny, not funny, what we learn about ourselves once these rose-colored glasses of our nationalistic history are removed. Please allow me to illustrate. We're going to get a history lesson here. Love history, by the way. Starts out by saying in the 1956 movie The King and I, Yul Brynner plays a fictional king of the nation of Siam, later known as Thailand. Deborah Kerr plays opposite Brenner as a Westerner hired as a teacher and a governess to the king's many children. In one minor scene, the hired teacher is shocked to discover the king's version of Siam's national size, strength, global influence have been grossly embellished via the curriculum being taught to the king's children. The king is justifiably proud of his nation and its history, but he's clearly had his nation's history inflated and taught to his citizens. This conflict is just a small part of the movie, but it remains a pungent point when, if we fail to acknowledge our own national history, I strongly recommend the movie. It's a wonderful, in spite of the king's trumped up nationalistic views. The point is not that Siam was or wasn't a great nation. The point is that all nations have wonderful and troubled components to their histories. Recognizing both is the most responsible and mature position a nation can take. Troubled histories are not something to be ashamed of or to hide from. Our history is our best resource of what to do or not to do going forward, particularly if our history was harmed, oppressed, or cheated people, groups from around the world. Just like individuals are not quick to forget or forgive if we've been harmed, oppressed, or cheated, entire people groups are even more unlikely to forget or forgive, especially if the nation that caused them harm ignores, attempts to erase, or denies the facts and challenged history. Sounds familiar. For example, this is a mouthful, so take it in slowly. Not all of us were taught that the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804, caused by the French colonization of the West Indies, the plantation system on Saint Domingue, the brutal slave regime of Saint Domingue, I think I'm pronouncing that right, the colonial social and racial hierarchy, and the spread of Enlightenment ideas from the American and French revolutions enraged enslaved peoples who rose up against the French regime in Haiti. This revolution was the real reason the United States of America made the 1803 Louisiana Purchase from the French, mainly because Napoleon was so broke that he had to sell that land in order to continue to his on and off fight with the British, 1689 to 1815, until Waterloo. Meanwhile, we were taught in school that the Louisiana Purchase was simply made America bigger and richer because all the natural resources, it was too good of a deal to pass up. Not a lot is mentioned about the Haitian Revolution in our history books, never mind that the purchase caused mass genocide and the Trail of Tears, all because of manifest destiny. God evidently decided the U.S. needed to assume everything from ocean to ocean, which led to more tension with people groups because the expansion required removing, re educating indigenous people, and subsequently identifying which states would be slave states or free states, all the while the Civil War was kicking off, which eventually triggered the Battle of the Alamo in 1836, a part of the larger Texas Revolution in which the Mexican state of Tejas was the center of conflict, falsely illustrated as a war-free and liberated peoples who happened to desire a slave state. You're right, this is a mouthful. Interesting, but a mouthful. And they go on the free and liberated state versus Mexico in defense of their territory who desired free state. The soon to be Americans 13 years later won independence and became a self-governing Republic of Texas in 1845. Texas became a U.S. state, remember, formerly part of Mexico. Texas had been an independent country since 1836 and sought annexation by the U.S., but the question of slave state lingered. So the process took nearly 10 years due to the political divisions over slavery. We're not always taught this because of the same inclinations of the King of Siam in the movie, The King and I. Our leaders, plus formal and informal organizations of influence, did not want our professed greatness to be tainted by our real history. Now, on behalf of the countless people groups removed, killed, and oppressed for the sake of our great nation, maybe acknowledging our history, learning from it, and teaching our real path to nationhood would have been a much better option given the state of divide, conflict, and chaos we have today. There are hundreds of these historical fallacies sprinkled throughout our history books and curriculum in elementary, junior high, and high schools and colleges. For the most part, it's the motives and methods surrounding our historical events that are embellished to portray our nation's history in a more favorable light, like a call of those wishing to be free and liberty and justice for all, which is a noble motive, except it's only partially true. All right, fact one. Pretending our nation's higher number of acts of greatness simply outweigh our lesser numbers of atrocities should balance the scales of historical justice is the inaccuracy of our view of our history. In fact, it's madness. Fact two. Truthfully, a country can be a great nation even though that country's history is challenging. Both things can be true. A nation's citizens can still be patriotic and love their nation even if they acknowledge challenging components of their nation's history. Again, both things can be true. Fact three. Also true patriotism isn't bending history to support political, social, and nationalistic agendas. Patriotism is acknowledging we had faults, learning from our history, and making sure we don't repeat those faults. More and more, I find myself shocked and angered at what we learn, discover, or find out about our nation's history that conflicts with what we learned in schools. Maybe this is what we should be teaching our kids instead of this continued brainwashed version of our perceived greatness. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greatest nation of them all? The nation who is most responsible and mature about itself is the greatest of them all. KCT. Now, I feel like after reading that, very informative, very interesting. Thank you for that, KCT. But I feel like all of us should get some college credit for this, because if we listened to it and comprehended it, we learned a lot in this. I probably learned more in that email than I learned in my entire college career, albeit a year. Mainly because I was mostly drinking beer then. But KCT, thank you for elucidating that information. It's all information I didn't know. I may have heard some of those things now and again, but I think you're right. I think instead of promoting how great we are, we should look at all the facts. I mean, that's kind of what I do with a rational boomer. When you're watching the media, they'll tell you all the bad things or all the good things. I try to tell you all things. And then when we know all things, then we can seriously look at what our problems are and figure out an angle to deal with them. So again, KCT, thank you very much. All right. We have another email. This one comes from Vinny. I don't remember getting one from Vinny before, so this should be interesting. He says, "Hey, Mike, I have listened to your show for about a year now. I've found you on TikTok. I love your content and your point of view, and I think that maybe I could be a contributor to the show. I'm part of the generation known as Zennials. I was born in 1981 and don't quite fit into the Gen X generation nor the millennial generation. We are quite unique in that respect. With Gen X, we were also latchkey kids with absent working parents, but we were also raised in an age of technology. We can see how our parents fucked up, but unlike Gen X, we want to do something about it. I personally feel that Zennials are truly the smartest generation, or at the very least, the most disillusioned generation. I'm a small blue dot in the Red Sea of Utah, and I think I have some unique opinions on MAGA boomers and many other right-wing banana pants. I live in one of the reddest counties in one of the reddest states, and I think I have a lot to contribute. If you're willing, I would love to be on your podcast and see where it goes. Let me know when you can, Vinny." Well, as a matter of fact, I did reach out to him, and he will be on the show at some point. And I think he does probably have an interesting point of view, being from Utah and given his age and given his perspective. So Vinny will be on the show at some time soon. I'm guessing maybe next week. Depends on when he's available. All right, the next one comes from James. He said, "Why would Kristen Welker refer to Trump as President Trump at her interview with him on Meet the Press? I wouldn't even address him with the title Mr. I never cared for Kristen Welker. She was always come across to me as a power crazy in the journalism world. I already miss Chuck Todd. I have seen a change at NBC for quite some time and follow them less than many other news sources I follow." James. Now, what James is talking about, there was a story that came out yesterday, and apparently NBC, in their ultimate wisdom, has decided with Kristen Welker taking over Meet the Press, taking it over from Chuck Todd, that she is going to do an interview with Donald Trump. And I'm thinking to myself, you didn't learn anything from CNN and what was going on there, for Christ's sake? Come on. Come on. Anyway, there's a little different situation here than the town hall that was on CNN. First of all, I've always thought Kristen Welker was a decent reporter. I don't know a lot about her. I haven't seen her extensively, but what I've seen, she seems to be reasonable, intelligent, and articulate. I guess we'll find out when she takes over Meet the Press, and especially when she interviews Donald Trump. Now, the advantage Kristen Welker has, and hopefully she's smart enough to understand that and consider this, the advantage she has, she was able to watch the town hall meeting with Caitlin Collins. Now, Caitlin Collins, always thought of as a good reporter too. But you would presume that Kristen Welker would have watched that and see where she fucked up, because Caitlin Collins obviously fucked up. She allowed Donald Trump to run roughshod and turn that show into just him. He wouldn't answer any questions. He wouldn't do anything. He just blabbed and talked shit and lied and ended up defaming E. Jean Carroll again, for Christ's sake. What an idiot. So I would hope that Kristen Welker saw that and is going to protect herself from getting caught up in the same situation. I have to presume she'll do that up until the time the interview airs, and then we can make a decision whether she did a good job or not. Now, the other thing that's going to be interesting about this particular interview, it's not going to be live. It's going to be recorded. And NBC has said, we're going to record it so we can fact check it. That's a good one. If you've got a guy that's going to fact check Donald Trump's interview, that motherfucker's going to be working overtime because everything he says is a fucking lie. And then what are you going to do? And what if Kristen Welker does learn a lesson from Caitlin Collins and handles it differently? Maybe like Mehdi Hassan might handle it by putting him in the corner, forcing him to answer, not letting him to run over her. What if she does that? What is Donald Trump going to do at that point? Well, he's probably going to do what he did to Leslie Stahl: stand up and walk the fuck out, because he doesn't like to face the music. He doesn't like truth. He doesn't like facts, and he has no answers for them. So the only thing he can do is get indignant, stand up, and walk the fuck out. So this interview that's coming up Sunday on Meet the Press could turn out to be quite the shit show. And I don't particularly like watching Donald Trump get interviewed because it's all the same shit and it makes me angry. But I know I kind of have a duty to you folks. I know a lot of you won't watch it, and I don't want to watch it, but I do kind of want to watch it. It's kind of like a train wreck. You got to slow down and take a look because you know it's just going to go badly. Anyway, I'll watch it. At least I'll try to watch it. Or I'll try to see some outtakes. I'm going to be going to Savannah on Sunday, probably not till about noon, but I'll be in the airport about 9-10 o'clock. So I'll try to catch it on my phone and see what it looks like. And then we can talk about it here. I don't want to give Donald Trump too much of a platform. I mean, we talk about him all the time, but usually it's regarding the stupid and crazy and corrupt and criminal shit he does. But no doubt he's probably going to implicate himself in more things. This interview, he thinks he can talk his way out of things and maybe carry the narrative. I think, in fact, he's going to put himself in a worse situation. He's going to make it worse for him. There's been a couple of preview cuts that have gotten out, and none of them make him look very good. But I'm kind of intrigued in watching it. I hope Kristen Welker handles it properly, but I'm not counting on anything. All right. This next one comes from Jace, and he's been keeping us up to date with the impeachment trial going on in Texas, the impeachment of Attorney General Ken Paxton, that criminal piece of shit. Now, as I talked about yesterday, it was intended that Ken Paxton's mistress would testify in front of the Texas Senate. And the interesting part of that is that Ken Paxton's wife happens to be a Texas senator. Well, that could be interesting, but it turns out that she hasn't appeared. Jace goes on to say, hey, Mike, well, the mistress didn't make an appearance yesterday to testify. Some kind of rule they have to have so many hours for a witness to appear makes no sense, but it's Texas. Go figure. Yeah, I think there's 24 hours after they're asked to attend or something like that, and it wasn't quite 24 hours. Sounds like a bullshit rule. Now, Paxton said he would have pled the fifth she would have pled the fifth anyway. You know who didn't plead the fifth? Hillary fucking Clinton, the one of these dumbass Republicans vilify. And speaking of dumbasses, their king, Trump, said he is supporting Paxton against the so-called rhinos. Well, of course he is. Trump probably has a fondness for Paxton because he's probably more corrupt than him. Goddamn, can you imagine Paxton bringing his AG as president would make the Freedom Caucus look like Elizabeth Warren? Chase goes on to say, well, not much is left, so we may have some sort of decision soon. There are some moves to vote to ban his ass from running again if he is indeed expelled. Hope he is and can't hide under his role as Texas AG anymore. Then the feds can get what's left. We'll continue to watch, and if a decision is made, I'll be ready to come on and discuss it. Till then, Jace. Well, thank you, Jace. I appreciate it. There's so many things going on, so many court cases, trials, indictments, court hearings. I mean, we had a court hearing yesterday in Georgia, and thankfully, all those hearings are televised. So I got a chance to watch it. And these are preliminary hearings. This isn't the trial as yet. One thing we did find out about the situation in Georgia is this. We know that Sidney Powell and Ken Cheesebro, and I saw somebody refer to these two, and I thought it was funny. They refer to them as cheese and Kraken. I like that. Anyway, I didn't make that up. Somebody else did. But anyway, we know that they asked for a speedy trial, and the presumed date is October 23rd. It could be pushed out a week or two, but in that area anyway. Now, Fonnie Willis said, you know what? Hey, let's do all 19 on October 23rd. And what we found out in this particular hearing is that Sidney Powell and Ken Cheesebro will stand trial together, even though there's really nothing connecting them. They were all part of the big scheme, but they had different parts, and I don't even know that they know each other. And they're not too happy about it, but the judge isn't hearing it. So the remaining 17, including Meadows and Giuliani and Donald Trump, they will. It could be just one more trial with 17 people. It could be two more trials. I don't know how it's all going to work out, but we should be hearing about that at some point soon. And of course, we'll keep you apprised of what's happening when we find out what's happening. But that's going to be interesting. That first trial, Fonnie Willis has said she's going to use all her evidence in every and all trials that she's doing for this. So it could get a little repetitive or redundant, but we'll see what happens. I got to think that once that trial starts with Sidney Powell and Ken Cheesebro, if there hasn't been people that have cut a deal and decided to flip on Donald Trump and everybody else, that trial will be the impetus of people doing it. Ultimately, I don't think we'll have another 17 people to be tried. It'll be less than that. But don't worry, people like Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump and Mark Meadows, they got nobody to flip on. They're the big fish. They aren't going to accept them flipping on anybody because there's nobody to flip on. Well, I should say Giuliani and Meadows might flip on Trump, but they're not going to get out of it completely. They're still going to be prosecuted for some things. They might get less time in jail, but they aren't going to get off completely. The goal here is to get Donald Trump. He is the head of the snake, and that needs to be cut off. All right, I have one last thing here in terms of emails, and this isn't really an email. This was a comment that was left on the podcast page, and I have no real way of answering them when they put that on the page. I can publish it so people can see it, but I can't answer them. I don't have an email or anything, so I thought I would start to put those comments on the podcast page on the show. I presume they listen to the podcast. Anyway, this comes from Glenda, very short. It says, I can listen to you 24 hours a day. Well, Glenda, I think there's medication for that, and you may want to get it because, you know, my family and friends, they have a hard time listening to me for 24 minutes, let alone 24 hours. But I appreciate the kind words and I appreciate the compliment. And I thank you for listening to the podcast and hope you continue to do that. So thanks again, Glenda. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we will be right back. All right, we are back on the Rational Boomer podcast for the second half, and we had a lot of news happening yesterday, some interesting stuff. Of course, the big news was that Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, has been indicted. by federal prosecutors on gun charges. Now, this is interesting. Now, you might remember that Hunter Biden had worked out a plea deal, and that went to shit. And then instead, they took David Weiss, who was looking into this, made him a special prosecutor, and now he comes back with this, which is interesting because he's the same prosecutor that cut the first deal, and now he's got indictments. Now, the three charges stem from an investigation by special counsel David Weiss, who U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed last month to explore possible wrongdoing by Hunter Biden. Two charges concern Hunter Biden, who's 53, by the way, allegedly submitting a form falsely stating that he was not using illegal narcotics when he purchased a Colt Cobra revolver in 2018. And one concerns him allegedly possessing that firearm while using narcotics. Now, what you have to understand about this, there's at least one case in an appeals court that said this particular law that they're trying to apply to Hunter Biden is unconstitutional. Seems interesting they would pick that law to try to prosecute Hunter Biden. And what I find really weird about this is that it's about guns. And the Republicans are up in arms and think he should be roundly punished. But here's the thing. Isn't it true that Republicans believe anybody and everybody should have a gun, whether they're psychotic, whether they're drunk, whether they're anything? The whole reason it was overturned in appeal is because the Republicans pushed it. So now you have to wonder about this. Should we all start screaming, what about the Second Amendment? What don't you understand about the meaning of shall not? You think everybody should have guns. Well, apparently you think everybody who's Republican should have guns, but nobody else. Yeah, that's not going to go very far. Now, the gun possession charge was originally part of a plea deal that fell apart in July when the judge overseeing the case scrutinized the details about the plea agreement, which would have had Biden submitting guilty pleas on a misdemeanor tax charge and entering a drug diversion program instead of pleading guilty on the possession charges. Now, you would think that the Republicans were joyous about this indictment and the fact that Hunter Biden will possibly ultimately get punished, and then they can make hay about that. But they're not happy about it. And here's why they're not happy about it. Because of all the charges that Hunter Biden could be charged with, this is the one they can't even come close to connecting Joe Biden to. I mean, see, that shows exactly what their intentions are. Their intentions were to get Joe Biden, and they're just trying to do it through Hunter Biden. So they're mad about this. They don't like this at fucking all. They're upset about it. But they still think Hunter Biden should be indicted, prosecuted, and put in jail for gun issues. You know what's going to happen in this case? Hunter Biden's lawyer is going to bring up the Second Amendment, and all these Republican and conservative judges are going to have to deal with what they've already decided when Republicans are in this position. They can hardly go back on it, because if they go back on it, that might set precedents to change the law, and they don't want that. So this puts Republicans and conservative judges in a tight spot. Now, each of these charges carries a maximum term of 10 years, and there's no way that he's going to do 30 years in prison. It's just not going to happen. Fact of the matter is, this will also probably be pled out ultimately. Hopefully, some of the loopholes that were in the first pleading will be gone, and we can be done with this. But the thing about it is the Republicans don't want to be done with it. They want the tax charges and maybe some other charges so they can try to figure out a way to tie Joe Biden into this, because this is all about Joe Biden in the 2024 election. They need to find some dirt on Joe Biden. Well, they've been trying for 5 or 6 years and have found zip, no dirt on Joe Biden. And this is driving them nuts. And I think it's fucking hilarious. You would think if a guy is president for 2.5 years or 2.5 years plus, there would be some dirt you can find. But instead, they have to go back in time during the time when they were in charge, when Trump was president, and find something that they never found anything to go after Joe Biden about. Otherwise, they would have. So they can't find anything now. They've got to take something from the dusty closet, wipe it off, and hope to God they can do something with it. They know they can't get a conviction with Joe Biden on this. The only thing they're concerned about is trying to taint Joe Biden's image. Now, you would think they'd learn a lesson about this, because this isn't the first time they've done that. Remember back in 2020? 2020, Donald Trump and the Republicans tried to find dirt on Joe Biden in the Ukraine, tried to get the president of Ukraine to find that dirt. Well, now, 3 years later, what can we say? They found no evidence and there were no indictments. But it didn't start there. Let's go back to 2016. They made Hillary Clinton seem like the most notorious criminal in the history of America. They were talking about 33,000 emails. They were talking about servers, all kinds of shit. They got Hillary Clinton to testify for 11 hours, which is 11 hours more than any Republican testified. None of them stood up and testified at all. But in that case, how many indictments were there? 0. Did they find any evidence to their claims? Nothing. So you have to wonder why they keep doing this. And it's not about finding anybody guilty. It's just trying to smear people, because that's the only thing they have that they can use. That's the only strategy they can employ in order to win an election. It worked in 2016, but it sure as hell didn't work in 2020. And things have gotten worse for the Republicans since that time. So it's not going to work in 2024. These guys are almost pretty pitiful, to be perfectly honest with you. They are lame. The tactics that they're using are proven to be failures, but they still use them. Let's talk about failures. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy dared his right-wing haters to try to take away his speaker's gavel during a closed-door meeting Thursday morning. This is what he said. I love this. If you want to file a motion to vacate, then file the fucking motion, McCarthy told his Republican colleagues, according to Representative Brian Mast, a Republican and a McCarthy supporter. See, Kevin finally grew up a set of balls. And he finally realized something I've been saying all along. The MAGA group really wants to push the impeachment, even though they know there aren't enough votes in the House, let alone the Senate, to impeach Joe Biden. They want to threaten it, like I say, carry the narrative and make people nervous, try to be the bully and get people to fold. But nobody's doing that. And the same could be said for Kevin McCarthy. Now, Kevin McCarthy sold his soul to the MAGA Freedom Caucus, whatever you want to call them. And they held this motion to vacate over his head so he would do their bidding. Now, when we went through the debt ceiling process, he did exactly the opposite of what MAGA and the Freedom Caucus wanted him to do. If there was a time when they were going to take him down, it would have been then, but they didn't. So Kevin McCarthy's feeling a little cocky, and he probably should, because much like the impeachment, They don't have enough votes in the House to vacate Kevin McCarthy. They'll get all the MAGA fucks, 35 people out of 218. They might get some of the remainder as well, but not enough to do the job. And the problem with that is if they say, we're going to make you vacate, we're going to vote you out, and they fail, instantaneously, the Freedom Caucus becomes weak, lame, and not an issue anymore. Kevin McCarthy knows this. It took him a while, but he knows this. And MAGA knows this too. But that doesn't stop them from doubling down, tripling down, and making these threats because, well, that's what bullies do. And they hope that people will fold up and cower from them. Well, MAGA is losing power every day. And Kevin McCarthy has decided to no longer cower from them because he knows better. Now, that's not to say Kevin McCarthy is a good Speaker of the House, but the Democrats would just soon keep him there as opposed to kick him out. First of all, if they kick him out, there's nobody in the Republican House of Representatives that could get 218 votes. So you wouldn't have a Speaker of the House, and absolutely zero would get done, which is kind of important, especially since we have some appropriations and budgets we need to get done by the end of the month. Otherwise, the country shuts down. So if they were to put that motion to vacate up tomorrow or today, most Republicans wouldn't vote for it because they know what it would do to this country. And they know that they would be held responsible for it. So MAGA can't win. They can threaten, but they really can't do anything. They're weak-ass bitches. They know it, but they're still trying to be intimidating. Sorry, Matt Gaetz. Sorry, Freedom Caucus. You wore out your welcome. You don't have it in you anymore. Nobody is afraid of you. The one person that was afraid of you, Kevin McCarthy, told you to fucking do it. So fucking do it. That's what I'd like to see. I want MAGA to vote for an impeachment. I want them to try to vacate Kevin McCarthy's seat because they will fail. And then all of a sudden they become inconsequential. Now, we were talking about the shutdown. The federal government will partially shut down at the end of the month if Congress can't pass a spending bill. And House Republicans have no clear plan to pass one. They have 2 weeks to do this, and they have done nothing about this. All they're talking about is impeachment. The country and all of us are hanging in the balance, and they haven't done fuck all to tend to this situation. Now, as been the case all year, McCarthy is caught between the ultra-conservative members of the House Freedom Caucus, who are insisting on lowering spending levels than the Senate or the White House would accept, and the rest of his conference. Now, they already cut a deal on this. McCarthy did with Biden, but they want to cut it even more, leave it to the Republicans to renege on an existing agreement. Now, on Tuesday, McCarthy added another wrinkle to the situation by opening an impeachment inquiry against President Joe Biden. But even though McCarthy's far-right critics have longed for such a step, they weren't happy about it. They weren't happy about it at all. Now, Matt Gaetz called it a baby step, criticized McCarthy for refusing to support lower spending, and threatened to file a motion to vacate the chair, which would force an immediate no confidence vote in the speaker, which would fail. Matt Gaetz would fail. Matt Gaetz basically said that McCarthy had no intention of impeaching Joe Biden. And you know what? He's right, because he knows it's a loser. Just because Matt Gaetz and the Freedom Caucus are willing to burn down the government and the country for that matter, doesn't mean anybody with an above average intelligence would agree with them. And Kevin McCarthy, not the brightest motherfucker in the world, but he's definitely brighter than Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, Jim Jordan, or any of these motherfuckers. On Wednesday, the House abandoned plans to vote on a defense spending bill that would be part of an eventual government funding package, apparently because McCarthy couldn't muster enough support for the measure. Gates responded Thursday to McCarthy's expletive with one of his own. Well, I bet he did. And Matt Gaetz said, how about we just move the fucking spending bills? Well, things are getting a little sketchy in the House of Representatives. We remember when Marjorie Taylor Greene called Lauren Boebert a little bitch. And wasn't it Marjorie Taylor Greene asking for decorum? Well, it sounds like with the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives, decorum is no longer a thing. All right, let's go talk about what's going on in Georgia. We talked about a little bit during the emails. Attorney Kenneth Chesebro, the alleged architect of the so-called fake elector scheme, launched in a frenzy attempt to keep former President Donald Trump in office, just cannot get away from Sidney Powell. Now, I got to imagine anybody that knows Sidney Powell would want to get away from that crazy, batshit crazy bitch. Now, after ruling last week that the two will be tried together, Fulton County Supreme Court Judge Scott McAfee on Thursday further ruled that their trial will be conducted apart from Trump and 16 other co-defendants in the sprawling racketeering case. McAfee said, after considering the parties' filings and without the need for a hearing, the court further finds that severing the remaining seven co-defendants is simply a procedural and logistical inevitability. And he left the door open for some further adjustments. Like I say, presumably at this point you would think, okay, there would be these two who wanted the speedy trial, there would be a trial, and then there would be 17 others in a second trial. I have a feeling there might be 3 trials. I don't know how it's all going to break out, but of course, we'll keep you apprised as we become apprised. Now, the two became intertwined after Chesebro filed a motion in August invoking his constitutional right to a speedy trial. Powell followed with her own speedy trial demand a day later, and Willis happily obliged, setting a trial date for October 23rd. If Chesebro was trying to call Willis's bluff, it may not have worked, according to defense attorney Peter Polano. And that's probably what he was doing. Well, let's do it right away, thinking she wasn't ready. Oh, he doesn't know Fani Willis. Fani Willis was born fucking ready, so that's not going to be a problem. She honestly believes that she could prosecute all 19 on October 23rd. You can call her bluff, but she ain't bluffing, bitch. Now, he told the Daily Beast, when you show up at an arraignment, the prosecution knows exactly what their case is, and the defense doesn't necessarily know yet. And so whatever defense posturing happens early on, the defense investigation is probably at an early stage or earlier stage than what the prosecution is. Oh, too bad. Thursday's ruling is not necessarily a win for Willis, who would have preferred to try all 19 defendants as one. However, it is a clear loss for Chesebro, who wanted desperately to separate himself from Powell, who has come to represent the fringiest of fringe elements associated with the right wing. Now, Chesebro, whose former law school classmates say they cannot fathom how the once respected litigator came to be wrapped up with the former president, tried and failed earlier this month to sever his case from Powell, whose far-out theories about non-existent vote theft have been subject of widespread mockery. Now, apparently, Mr. Chesebro had never physically met Sidney Powell. Mr. Chesebro had never sent an email to Miss Powell. Mr. Chesebro has never received an email from Miss Powell. Mr. Chesebro has never called Mrs. Powell. Mr. Chesebro has never received a phone call. And they went on. There's no connection to them. But what they fail to understand is this is a RICO case. There's a bunch of moving parts in this. And it's not surprising that certain people didn't meet one another. I'm sure there are fake electors that never met Donald Trump or Mark Meadows. That's not the point. The point, this was a big mechanism in order to accomplish one goal, and that's overturning elections. And whether one or two of those people were connected doesn't really make a difference. They were all working toward the same goal, hence RICO. I know they want to be treated special, but the fact of the matter is that too fucking bad. And that's pretty much what the judge said. Now, there's kind of a funny story out there. I think it's funny. Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado. She's always talking about Christian nationalist views, and she hasn't hesitated to attack Democrats as anti-family, anti-religion, and anti-motherhood. But according to reporting in the Denver Post, Boebert was kicked out of a Beetlejuice performance at Denver's Buell Theater on Sunday. It was a play. And a new reporter reveals she was asked to leave after she refused to quit vaping near a pregnant woman. And then she got indignant and loud and obnoxious. You can take the girl out of the dumb fuckery, but you can't take the dumb fuckery out of the girl. Now we know, I did a TikTok about this. I was talking about a period of time when I worked in advertising. And as I read this, I thought of a perfect commercial. Now, we know that Lauren Boebert ended up being the representative from Colorado with the help of Ted Cruz. A lot of money, $26,000. We don't know if there was any sexual connection between the two. The thought of it is kind of nauseating. But anyway, you got Ted Cruz, and you got Lauren Boebert, and she ends up being in the House of Representatives. I have a feeling that a lot of people were looking at this as kind of a Pretty Woman type situation. The moderately attractive yet trashy woman being helped by the wealthy, powerful guy. But here's the deal. Lauren Boebert is no Julia Roberts, and Ted Cruz certainly isn't a fucking Richard Gere. They're kind of Walmart versions of those. But here's the idea for the commercial. When I think about all these groups, Lincoln Project, all that stuff, they come up with the commercials. I thought of a good commercial for Lauren Boebert's opponent. Now, this opponent that she's going up against in 2024 is the same one she went up again and just barely beat in 2022. He lost by 400 or 500 votes, something like that. But anyway, what I think he should do is have himself standing in front of a 1990s beat to shit rusty Ford Escort and have a little sign that says, "Lauren, your chariot awaits." And then the tagline would be, "Send Lauren back to the poll." And I'm not talking POLL, I'm talking POLE. I think that would probably drive this allegedly religious woman nuts. Now, the Denver Post reports that 3 attendees, including the woman, complained about Boebert. The woman alleged that when she was asked the MAGA congresswoman to quit vaping, she refused. Boebert's office has denied the allegation. Well, that's well and good, but I've seen the video of the whole event, so yeah, it fucking happened. Now, Huffington Post Josephine Harvey notes, the woman who said she did not recognize Boebert told the Post she asked the lawmaker to stop vaping, but the congresswoman simply said no. She said Boebert was singing along loudly with her hands in the air and took multiple long videos during the first half of the performance. The woman made a complaint during intermission. When she returned to her seat with her husband, Boebert called her a sad and miserable person. Well, Boebert would know what a sad and miserable person is. Now, the Colorado Sun reports that Buell representatives confirmed that 2 attendees were escorted from the theater, ironic term, during the Beetlejuice presentation, but declined to say who it was. Again, on TikTok, one other creator had a video of it from multiple cameras from the time she was in the theater to the time she was walking out the door. It was without question Lauren Boebert, and she was pointing her finger at people, no doubt saying, "Do you know who I am? Yeah, bitch, I know who you are, and I don't like you." All right, moving on. Mitt Romney came out and said that he is not running for re-election in 2024. That's kind of big news. He said it was time for younger people to take up the mantle. Now, Mitt Romney is 76 years old. It seems old to you and me, but in the Senate, he's like a fucking teenager compared to Dianne Feinstein and Mitch McConnell and some of these other fucks, Grassley. But he's going to quit. And there's probably a few reasons for this. He's probably tired of dealing with what his party has become. It's nothing like it once was. He's probably embarrassed. Maybe at some point the Republicans have said, listen, Donald Trump's going nowhere. He's the hot ticket now, but he isn't going to be the candidate. No way. Ron DeSantis is dying on the vine, and all the other fucks are goofy. We may have to try to turn this thing around and try to make Republicans more respectable. So maybe they would go to Mitt Romney and say, hey, how about you run? Now that's completely coming out of my head. There has nothing been said about that. I don't know that it's even considered, but I could see them doing that. He's a little old for that. By the time he'll be like 77, basically Donald Trump's age, once the election comes along. And of course, that would put him at 81 at the end of his term. So I'm not sure that is what's going to happen. But the Republicans are in bad shape right now. They're going to have to come up with some answer. They're not going to win the 2024 election. At this point, they have to figure out a way not to be embarrassed and not to be involved in a fucking landslide. There's another part of this that I wonder too. As I said, Mitt Romney is not going to run in 2024, but he's still got a year and a half of being senator. Now that he has nothing to lose, is he going to fight back against these Trump-la-fuck motherfuckers? Because he doesn't like them. How do I know that? Well, he's got a book coming out too. The Atlantic's McKay Coppins is out with the first excerpt of his highly anticipated biography of Senator Mitt Romney, timed to the 212 GOP presidential nominee's announcement today that he will not seek re-election. So it goes back, 11 years. Now, the important thing is, why does this really matter? Romney, the only GOP senator to vote to convict former President Donald Trump in his first impeachment trial, was brutally honest about his Republican colleagues over the course of the 2 years of interviews. Yeah, he was talking some shit, and that's coming out. And he knows the book is coming out, so he knows he doesn't have a prayer, even if he does run, because the MAGA fucks, like our previous emailer said, he's from Utah, a very red state, a very Trumpian state. So this isn't going to bode well for Mitt Romney. Hopefully he makes a lot of money from it. On January 2nd, 2021, Romney texted Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell to warn about extremist threats law enforcement had been tracking in connection with pro-Trump protest on January 6th. So Mitch McConnell knew what was coming, but Mitch McConnell never responded. Romney kept a tally of the dozen plus times that the Republican senators privately expressed solidarity with his criticism of Trump. You're lucky, McConnell once told him. You can say the things we all think. A McConnell spokesman said the GOP leader does not recall this conversation. That fucker doesn't recall breakfast, so that's not surprising. Now, Romney shared a unique disgust for Senator Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. Remember what Al Franken said? He said, I think I like Ted Cruz than most people in the Senate, and I fucking hate Ted Cruz. Apparently that's true. He thought they were too smart to believe Trump won the 2020 election, but put politics above the interest of liberal democracy and the Constitution. He was also highly critical of Senator J.D. Vance, a Republican from Ohio, who reinvented his persona to become a Trump acolyte after publishing a best-selling memoir about the working class that Romney loved. I don't know that I can disrespect someone more than J.D. Vance, Romney said. Now, after the House impeachment managers finished a presentation about Trump's efforts to pressure Ukraine to investigate the Bidens, McConnell told Romney they nailed him. But they didn't nail him because Mitch McConnell allowed him to slip out in the Senate. Taken aback, Romney said Trump would argue he was just investigating alleged corruption by the Bidens, the subject of the House Republicans' present-day impeachment inquiry. McConnell apparently said, if you believe that, I've got a bridge I can sell you. McConnell told Coppins he does not recall that conversation either. Now, it's either because he's a lying motherfucker or, like I say, he doesn't remember breakfast. Now, Romney said he never felt comfortable at a Senate GOP conference lunch after voting to convict Trump in 2020. A very large portion of my party really doesn't believe in the Constitution, he told Coppins a few months after January 6th. So now you can kind of tell, why Mitt is going to take his leave, take a powder, because he's going to get some serious heat. And it was very interesting regarding Mitt Romney. Now, Mitt Romney is a very wealthy guy. He's worth like about $175 million. We don't have to worry about Mitt Romney eating dog food or anything like that. He's going to be fine. But I find it really interesting. The special counsel investigating Hunter Biden is getting a lot of death threats. But do you think they're getting it? He's getting them from Democrats? Oh, no. He's getting them from Republicans. That's who these people are. They eat their own. But what really struck me was that Mitt Romney has been getting a lot of death threats. His family's been getting a lot of death threats. Mitt Romney has apparently been spending, now initially I thought it was $5,000 a month, which is a lot of money for security for his family and for himself. I've been corrected about that by a number of people on TikTok, and they said, no. It's not monthly. It's fucking daily. Can you imagine that? That's $150,000 a month just to protect your family and himself. And is it because of Democrats? Nope. It's because of Republicans, Trumplifucks, because he voted to impeach Donald Trump. They're coming after him, and they are relentless about it. They've fortunately not done anything because they're all fucking cowards. But the fact of the matter is, he is getting all kinds of threats. And so he's saying, I'm just going to take a fucking powder here. I'm getting the fuck out of Dodge because I'm just not going to do this anymore. I don't know if that'll take the pressure off him. I think once he leaves, it may get better, but they go after election workers in Georgia. So why would they stop going after Mitt Romney? And after this book comes out, it's just going to fuel the flames of more threats and potential violence. So Mitt's kind of in a weird position. They don't like him in the first place. He's spending a lot of money just to protect himself. And so he's going to leave, but he's still probably going to have problems. Again, like I said, you don't really have to worry about him because he's got money. He'll be fine. But wouldn't it be ironic if he ended up running for president? And I say that not thinking it will really happen. I don't think it will. But if I was a Republican and I wanted to rehabilitate the image of the Republican Party, it'd be somebody like him I ran so that I could be somehow appear normal, a normal party. But they've gone so far off the fucking rails, that's not even going to work at this point. And I would have to think that, well, the good thing about it is if Mitt Romney did run for president, at least during the time he was running, he can't win. But even if he did run for president, then he would have Secret Service protection for him and his family, at least during the campaign. And if he's paying $150,000 a month times a year, dude could save probably 1.75 million or something along those lines. So maybe he's looking to save a buck or two. Now, the last thing I wanted to bring up is kind of a local thing. I don't mean local to me, but local in terms of state government. The Republican-led Wisconsin State Senate on Thursday voted to fire Wisconsin Elections Commission Administrator Megan Wolf after Trump supporters accused her of rigging the 2020 election in Joe Biden's favor. Now, there have been investigations there and no evidence has been found, but we know Republicans don't need evidence. They just pull shit out of their ass. Spectrum News 1 reports that the Senate voted entirely along party lines to oust Wolf, despite the fact that she had drawn support from Republican election commissions who voted to nominate her for another term earlier this year. The final vote tally in Wisconsin State Senate was 22 in favor of firing Wolf and 11 against. The firing of Wolf is just one of many drastic actions that the Republicans in Wisconsin are taking to maintain power, as they are also mulling impeaching recently elected Wisconsin State Supreme Court Justice Janet Prozaiewicz. I don't even know if that's pronounced properly, but it doesn't matter. It's fucking Wisconsin. Now, that's before she's made even a single ruling. They just didn't like some of the things she said before she took office. Republicans are escalating their dangerous efforts to interfere with our elections. Days after announcing a push to have redistricting conducted by legislature-picked, legislature-approved map drawers, the Republicans today attempted to illegally fire our elections administrator. Now, I don't know if that's going to take or not, but that gives you an idea what some red states are doing. And the fact of the matter is that Wisconsin's not all that red. It's just that they're so gerrymandered, and the legislature in Wisconsin I think they have a supermajority or something like that in the Senate or the House, and it's just causing a fucking mess. They're holding on with their clammy hands to as much power as they can get. The question is, will they be able to hold on to it? I'm thinking they won't. I think Wisconsin Republicans are going to be going through some things, and it's all going to be tied to the downfall of the Republican Party as a whole in this country. As we get deeper into these trials and exposing the evidence and exposing what's going on in Wisconsin, as well as some of the other swing states, there's going to be a lot of shit that changes, and the Republicans are going to be hard-pressed to explain what the fuck they're doing, because what they're doing is highly illegal. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for spending the time to listen today. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll be here every day, just like we always are. But have a great day today, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.